Okay, let's talk about thesis statements and essay organization, which will be helpful in paper 2, which is your more traditional thesis-driven essay over the road, where you're going to be using quotes and things. And this is the type of essay that you're probably going to write most frequently in college. It might not apply to paper number 1 as much, since that's a more personal type of essay and not really necessarily a thesis-driven essay. But it will be valuable information for paper 2 as well as other papers that you'll write in college and in this class. So what makes a thesis statement? I know that can sound confusing or abstract, but in short, it's just the point that you're making in your paper. And you'll sometimes hear it called a claim in an argument, which is any type of writing where you're stating a point and then supporting it with evidence. Most of the evidence in paper 2 will come from quotes from the road. So some characteristics of a thesis statement: it's generally the last sentence of the intro paragraph, and it makes a clear, debatable point. It's concise. Most short papers, like what we're going to be writing, one sentence is going to be fine. If you get into longer research papers, it might take 2 sentences to make your claim, to state your thesis. But generally, 1 sentence is good. A good thesis statement is often an answer to a problematic question. So a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Good writing generally is driven by questions or dilemmas. We write to explore and then answer something, or we write to take a position in some kind of dilemma or debate. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And a good thesis statement generally takes some kind of risk and brings something new to the reader, and it needs proof. It's not easy to prove a good thesis. You have to do some work. You have to earn a good thesis. And the thesis itself, the thesis statement, the last sentence of the introduction, will generally have the question or the dilemma that it's answering or that it's talking about. It'll have information about that before the actual thesis statement. And we'll take some looks at some examples of that. A couple things that a thesis statement is not. The thesis itself is not a question. Again, it's a statement. It needs to be very clear about what point you're making. Again, it's usually preceded by a question, but the thesis itself is generally the answer to the question, not the question itself. A good thesis is not a description that doesn't require proof. So, for example, here's a poor thesis. The Road is a book about 2 people trying to survive after an apocalyptic event, right? Pretty much everyone would agree with that. There's no need to really support that. It's not bringing us any new information about the book. It doesn't really need proof, so it's a pretty blah thesis. And a good thesis statement is not mysterious or ambiguous. It's not meant to confuse the reader or to hint at something else. A good thesis will be very clear and direct. Here's the point that I'm making in my paper. So a couple ways. One way to think about a thesis statement is to look at it into 2 parts. So the topic, in other words, the what. So what is it that you're writing about? Often the road in paper 2. And the central idea, in other words, what about it? So think about what and what about it is one way to think about a thesis statement. Let's take a look at some examples. So if my topic is the father in the road, I'm really interested in doing an analysis of the father. That's my topic, and what's my point about the father is ultimately a good guy. So my thesis would say the father in the road is ultimately a good guy. And maybe the dilemma is he a good guy or a bad guy or something in between? Another topic, McCarthy's use of punctuation. You might have noticed it's a little bit different, right? And the point about it is used to show that necessity dictates value. So my thesis would be McCarthy's use of punctuation is used to show that necessity dictates value. That's something I'd have to prove with examples from the text. Another topic, McCarthy's argument in the road, and what about it, is that humans' abuse of power will lead to humanity's downfall. Again, this would be something I'd need to support using evidence from the text. So 3 examples of thesis statements right there, broken down by topic and central idea, the what and the what about it. But when it comes down to it, the easiest thing to remember is if you have a good question, and I'll provide a couple essay questions that you can use on your paper 2. You will also have the option of creating your own essay question. But if you have a good, juicy question that doesn't have an easy answer, and you answer it in your thesis, chances are you have a good thesis. It's already going to be something that needs to be proven and is debatable and is bringing something new to the reader. So we'll think about that a little bit this week, forming your own question that you might want to answer. But I'll also provide a few examples too. So here's one. What does McCarthy argue is most essential for survival in a cruel, uncaring world? Right? There's a lot of things that in the story that he's arguing are really important to surviving in this world that they are in, which could be kind of a parallel to our world in some ways, obviously exaggerated, but in the ways that people use each other, and it's dark and scary at times. So here's a possible answer to that. So here could be a possible thesis. In The Road, Cormac McCarthy argues X, Y, and Z are most essential for survival in a cruel, uncaring world. Now, X, Y, and Z, you would want to articulate what those are, but you can see how starting with a question and then just answering that question, simply giving an answer, will provide something that's debatable, right? Because other people might say, well, no, it's A, B, and C. But I'm going to be arguing X, Y, and Z are the most essential things that he's arguing. So a little bit of advanced instruction in thesis statements. So if you want to kind of take it to that next level, keep in mind that a good thesis is trying to pull a reader towards something new, something unexpected, something surprising, right? We're not just writing to tell people what they already know, right? We want to give them something new. So to create that sensation, what you can do sometimes is give some kind of old information first at the beginning of your thesis statement, or maybe it's a commonly held belief, or maybe it's an opposing view if you're doing some kind of, later like doing a research paper that's some kind of pro-con dilemma. But give the commonly held view before and then pull them into this new information. So one way to do this is by using what's called an although clause, which presents a contrast but also subordinates that contrasting point and then in turn emphasizes or elevates the point that you're making. So let's take a look at an example. Although some say the father in The Road is one of the good guys, so that's the commonly held belief, a closer look reveals he's not as good as he appears on the surface. So the essay would then go on to support that second half of the thesis, right? That the father's actually not just a good guy. Maybe he's more than that, or maybe he's even a bad guy. But you can see how the commonly held belief, the father's a good guy, comes first, and then I'm going to show you something new and interesting afterwards. So think about using one of those although clauses to present a commonly held belief or an old information before you move them into the new information. Here's an example from earlier. What does McCarthy argue is most essential for survival in a cruel, uncaring world? And now here's the kind of advanced thesis statement. Although most people would say food and water are most essential for survival, okay, that's the commonly held belief. In The Road, Cormac McCarthy argues compassion and empathy are more essential for survival in a cruel, uncaring world. So again, it automatically creates tension, right? Here's the old information, but I'm showing you something new that contrasts with that. So let's talk a little bit about essay organization. So we have a thesis statement. Now we want to support that thesis statement in the body of our essay. So typically you'll have an introduction paragraph or even paragraphs in a longer essay, but in our essays, our short ones, they're probably going to be a single introduction. And that just provides background information to prepare the reader for what your essay is going to be saying. So first of all, what's the topic of the essay? So if you're writing an essay about the road, probably a good idea to give a sentence or two about the road itself. Or specifically, if I'm writing about the father in The Road, I might give a sentence or two of information about the father in The Road. But what's more important probably is what is that question or dilemma that's motivating the writing. So say that is the father a good guy or a bad guy is your question. Now, what makes it difficult to answer that question? Well, some people say that he's a good guy because he does X, Y, and Z. Other people say he's a bad guy because he does A, B, and C. There's some truth to X, Y, and Z because of this. There's some truth to A, B, and C because of this. So when it comes down to it, is the father actually a good guy or a bad guy? And then your thesis, bang. I think that the father is da-da-da, or although the father was this, da-da-da. But a good introduction will center on the motivating problem or question or dilemma that is at the heart of the paper. So if you think about answering those specific questions that are listed here, your introduction kind of takes care of itself. And then after you've done that, again, the thesis statement will be the last sentence of that introduction. So it's just the answer to the question. Again, an intro can be more than one paragraph if it's needed, but in a shorter essay like ours, you'll probably just need one. In a research paper or something where you have to introduce a lengthier topic and a bigger dilemma, or a more problematic question with more competing positions, that kind of thing, a longer introduction might be helpful. But not in ours, probably. Body paragraphs then are going to be used to support the thesis, and they give reasons and evidence. So here's an example. Maybe I have my first body paragraph talks about one reason why the father might not be a good guy. So one reason the father is not just one of the good guys is X. And then I move into a quote. When the man and the boy are traveling, McCarthy writes, quote, and then I go on to explain how that supports the thesis. We'll be doing an assignment in a class where you are going to be building a paragraph that does this kind of thing, that walks us through a supporting paragraph. In a typical short essay like the ones we're going to be writing, again in papers 2 and 3, and then maybe 4, which is a research paper, 1 to 3 quotes is generally enough. If you get into too many quotes, it can be confusing, and even if you have one quote sometimes and you really go into detail about it, that can be enough evidence. Sometimes you need 2 examples or quotes, maybe 3, but if you're going to go more than 3, it could get a little bit long-winded. And you'll probably have at least 3 body paragraphs in a short essay like this. Again, each one having 1 to 3 quotes. You can definitely have more than 3 body paragraphs, but generally at least 3. And your conclusion. A couple things about that. It's not going to present any new quotes or new analysis. It's just kind of concluding and summarizing your paper's argument. So maybe you look at X, Y, and Z that you developed in your essay. And you definitely want to drive home your thesis again, but do it in a fresh way. Don't just repeat it word for word. Say it in some kind of new, compelling way. And a lot of times we'll end with a kind of something to get the reader thinking. One way to do this is to consider the broader significance. In other words, why is this even important? Why should the reader care about this? Here's a graphic organizer for a 5-paragraph essay. And again, it could be more than 5 paragraphs for sure. But this is your typical 5-paragraph essay. This handout is available in the Helpful Writing Resources page in Canvas. By clicking on Pages on the course menu, you'll then click View All Pages. You can go to all those writing resources, videos, and things like that. This organizer is there, but you can see how it kind of lets you just plug in some information to help you build your essay. So it can be helpful if you want to do a little bit of pre-writing to prepare yourself for your essay. So you can see in paragraph 1, the introduction, they ask for background information. So again, what's background on the topic? What's background on the question that you're investigating? Why is that a problematic question? Paragraph 2, your first reason that supports your thesis. Paragraph 3, your second reason. Paragraph 4, your third reason. And paragraph 5, your conclusion. So that's paper 2 and thesis-driven essays in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please let me know. Take care.